We also hear that don't want spray foam, that closed cell foam. It loses its R value over time. Yes, it does. That's a true statement. That's not a myth. It does. But be very careful. It doesn't go to zero. This curve that we're looking at here shows the R value. Actually, it shows the thermal conductivity, how much heat energy moves through the material. So this is the inverse of resistance, it's conductivity, but it makes for a better curve. As soon as you make foam, it has a great R value. It has very little thermal conductivity. And this is a period of days, hours, not weeks or years, but days or hours. You lose a fair amount of resistance and your conductivity goes up. If we look at the next area, this is in weeks. Again, that loss of insulation capability slows down and then it flattens out. So we become very stable. What is that time period? That's years. Now, the industry has said, well, how do we put a number on the insulation capability, the R value? Well, we create an LTTR, long-term thermal resistance value. And we're going to estimate that and call it our 15-year value. And that's good. Okay, so we have a test method that's been accepted by the industry for LTTR, long-term thermal resistance, and it's representing the thermal resistance of the material at 15 years. Great. Let's keep in mind how closed cell foam resists the transfer of heat. How does it do that? Well, very little of the resistance, the R value, is made up of the polymer itself, the plastic material. Most of the resistance to heat transfer in gas-filled cellular plastics is in that gas, that cell. It's the gas that's in the cell that is doing 3/4 of the heavy lifting associated with stopping heat transfer. Primarily, the cell gas that's giving you the R value. Radiation, there's nothing we can do about that, and we peg that number at about 20%. Now, if we know that 3/4 of the resistance, the R value for spray foam, is made up of the cell gas, that's the main component. If our R value changes over time, that must mean that that cell gas is changing. And this is where people jump to the conclusion that yes, it's changing. We're losing the blowing agent. That's not actually correct. And here's why. It does to some degree, but not entirely. When we make spray foam, it's hot. So we know that things occupy a lot of space when they're hot, and when they cool, they contract. Keep that in mind. As we make spray foam, within seconds, it goes from a liquid to a solid. It expands with heat. It's hot. It makes that plastic material. Boom. The polymer is locked in at a high temperature. Let's say 250, 275 degrees. You've created the cell. Now, over a short period of time, that cell cools. The volume of the cell, the walls that you've built, they don't change. What does change is the volume of that cell gas because it's cooling. It has to contract a little bit. And that creates a negative pressure inside that cell. Actually, inside the cell, it's a little bit negative pressure. Now, Mother Nature doesn't like things like that. She wants to have things in balance all the time. In order to balance that negative pressure, that vacuum that's in that cell, she adds, primarily nitrogen, air from the environment, and that gets into the cell gas rather quickly. If we recall that curve, we can see that in a matter of days, there's a big impact, a big change in the R value. And that's because, and that's associated with the polymer cooling, creating that negative partial pressure inside the cells, Mother Nature supplying air through the material, boom, we balance that pressure. We also change the R value because we've changed the cell gas. We've added air. It's no longer purely blowing agent. That's important. Now, over time, some of that blowing agent breaks down some of the polymer and actually gets into the polymer matrix because it's a reasonably good solvent. That's its other purpose in life, actually, is as a solvent. Over time, not a lot, but some. And over an extended period of time, this is where the years comes into play, that blowing agent actually escapes into the atmosphere. Not a lot. Some numbers are less than 5%. That's some of the estimates. So we do lose, over time, blowing agent to the atmosphere. But let's consider how much blowing agent's far less than 5%. And one of the reasons is the size of the molecule. And if we look back in the history of spray foam in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s, we used a product called CFC11. Not a very big molecule. I mean, physically, the size of the molecule was just not that big. And it could diffuse through these cell walls rather easily. So we lost a little bit more blowing agent to the atmosphere. Let's consider that the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. If we compare that to the size of the molecule of our current blowing agents, these HFOs, hydrofluoroolefins, that's a big molecule. It's about the size of a Mack truck, 53-foot trailer, compared to your Volkswagen Beetle. You can't drive it through the cells as easily. So over time, the loss of current technical blowing agents to the atmosphere is going to be much lower, and people have estimated that to be less than 5%.
To help you understand a little bit more about spray foam and to help you integrate it into your operation, I've created educational courses on my website at letstalkpur.com, or you can click on the link in the video description. I encourage you to check them out. I'll see you there.